Nobody asked for this video, but I thought it might be a good one to make. So, just a real quick kind of a recap here of what I have going on and why I'm doing what I'm doing. Not that it matters to anybody. But this is my glass blowing table. When I actually built this as a purpose-built glass blowing table. It's 3/16 plate steel that I had bent at the supply house where I got the steel from. Underneath of it is a piece of HardieBacker. Actually, it's two pieces of HardieBacker because this table's bigger than a standard piece of HardieBacker. And then underneath of the HardieBacker is it's like 1.25 inch MDF, and there's HardieBacker on the front of this thing too. So this, I never shot a video of me making this table, but this table is pretty substantial. Now I built it for two reasons the way I built it. The first reason is I built it as a glass blowing table. My old table was basically this table, but it just had HardieBacker on it. Big problem with HardieBacker is it's impossible to clean HardieBacker, and when you're working with glass has a tendency to stick to the HardieBacker, so if you were to wipe your hand across the table, you get glass splinters. Voice of experience. So, one of the things with this table is it was never designed to be sat at. This table came from a computer builder / repair facility. It actually had grounding straps on it and everything when I got it, and I removed them. It's a really nice heavy stainless tubular base that's adjustable so it can be perfectly level. This table is perfectly level. It was when I built it. I think it still is. I'd have to put a level on it, but it doesn't matter because I'm not moving it. It has adjustable legs, blah, blah, blah. Problem is it was always a little bit too high to sit at a standard chair at this table. So I made it even a little bit higher, and the result was it was way too high to work with the torch. For a welding table, I use this also as a welding table, or I used to use it as a welding table, but it's the perfect level for that. So you could sit at a chair and you could TIG weld all day long at a nice comfortable level, and it worked great for that. And it has I actually installed a bolt-on grounding clamp. It's over there, you can't see it. So this table can be grounded or act as the ground. So the side effect was I had to build this, I'm sitting on this little platform here to raise up the chair. I installed this, which is my adjustable torch mount, but because I installed the adjustable torch mount, I can't get the chair close enough now. I couldn't get the chair close enough because the arm on this one was too short. I also put a little, what do you call it, around it? Like a little curve around there because I fell off this thing like 4 times, and I'm like, well, I can't have that. It was quite funny to watch myself fall, but it was kind of a pain in the ass. So I built these chair arm extensions the other day, and they work perfectly. Well, I want to build one for this side. So, because now I'm all out of balance, all out of whack, and this one works so awesome that I want to do it on this side too. I don't really need this one, but it is kind of weird to sit in the chair when it's all kind of cattywampy. I mean, let's face facts. This chair is never going to get used for anything else ever again. It was a cheap chair, so for me to modify the chair is no big deal. But I never showed how I actually took the chair apart. Some people need to have their hand held to do things, myself included some days. But this is something that if you have a screwdriver and a table, if you have the tools to build this, then you have the ability to take this chair apart. So, truth be told, these chairs and this stuff that's made, this stuff is not ever supposed to actually be taken apart. They're designed to be assembled, not disassembled. So there is this plug here on the front of on this arm of the chair, and under normal circumstances, especially in the automotive industry, if they put a cap or a cover over something, there's usually like a little pry spot. You'll see it. It's like a little, it'll be like a little notch somewhere on there. Well, this one doesn't have it because, again, this is not designed to be taken apart. So I just jammed a screwdriver in here. I have this little freebie snap-on screwdriver I used. Alright, so you kind of have to pry it up a little bit and it comes right off. Alright, so here's the piece that holds it in, and it goes in that hole right there. So we're going to throw that away. These are two, either 11 millimeter or 7/16. They're kind of interchangeable. So I just used this one's a 7/16 because that's what I have on the ratchet here. Grease. They put grease on it, which is gross, which effectively holds the socket in too. Oh. Now, underneath these nuts are a metal washer and a fiber washer. The metal washer, actually, I'll show you, has a flat spot in it. The bolts have flat spots in them too. So I'm just going to hold my hand over the end of this and take it off. You'll see there's a flat spot on the stud there. And then these are the washers. I'm going to leave it this way, and I'll take it over the bench and take it apart. See? There's a... Alright, so there's the greasy ass nut. And then these are the washers here. Just, you want to note that the fiber washer is bearing surface. That's what they're using for a bearing. Now, I'm just going to take these and set them aside because they're gross and greasy. Now, you flip it over. There's screws on the bottom of it. Okay, and you can see this thing actually moves the way it's supposed to move. That it's supposed to be wiggly like that, which I actually think is kind of cool. So, I mean, really, it's as simple as pulling these screws out. Oh, and just for shits and giggles, I'm going to mark this. If you, even though I messed this up when I put the other one back together, believe it or not, black Sharpie shows up on black stuff. All right, so it didn't seem to matter which way went which, other than when you go to put it back together, you kind of want the longer. So this is off. This is asymmetrical. So this was short one and this one's long, and this is more padding on it. So I wanted that one closer to my elbow. I have a problem. I got a lot of problems, but here I'll just real quick. I don't know if it'll show up on video. See there, this is my elbow. This is kind of important. This is the whole reason I'm doing this. So this is my elbow here, and I had surgery on my elbow probably, I don't know, 6 months ago now. I have pretty bad gout, and I had a really bad gout flare, which caused like this crazy, disgusting growth on my elbow, which wouldn't heal. I put up with it for a year. It wouldn't heal, so I finally had it removed, surgically removed. The sad side effect of that is I no longer have any natural padding on my elbow. So when, it's kind of a joke, well, you bumped your funny bone, that ain't so funny. Well, I don't have a funny bone there anymore, which is not really, I don't have anything there anymore. I don't have any padding on my elbow, so if I lean on something, it has to be padded. I'm not a pansy, no matter what anybody says. I'm not a pansy, but it's really terrible. It's really painful. It's less painful than the gout, but it sure as hell is. Did I take this? I don't think I took it apart any further. No, I didn't. It's a hell of a lot less painful than the gout that was in there. Okay, so now I've got this apart. Now, when I built the other one, I actually had to make 2 of these because I messed it up the first time. And now I'm going to do it again. So I'm not going to mess it up again. I'm going to do it right this time. I made a pattern of the inside of this piece. So I need to make another one. So this is the pattern that I made for the inside. I just took a piece of plywood, or I just took a piece of paper, and I stuck it over top of it. And then I just took my fingernail actually and just cut a pattern. This one's not perfect, but it's perfect enough for what we're doing, because this has an arc to it. There's an arc in here. Now this one needs to have a pattern. The rest of it doesn't need that, but this one does. So I'm gonna go cut some plywood and I'll be right back. I cut 2 of these at 8.5 inches. This one's gonna go here to act as a base for the, this is going to go here to act as a base for this. I'm going to round these corners off on the sander just because I want them rounded off. This is a little oversized, and that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. This is just being used as a base for the slider. So oversized doesn't matter. If you wanted to make it perfect, you could make it perfect. I would actually recommend against that because of this raised lip here. This is raised to provide room for this, and we're going to get into that in a minute. Okay, so now this is the pattern that I made. Now I'm kind of glad I didn't there's 2 ways to do this. One is to glue the pattern directly to the part, and the other is you can use spray paint, or you can use a Blackmagic marker. I'm real fond of these big ass Blackmagic markers. Not only do they smell good, brings me back to my elementary school days, huffing the real stinky ones. Anybody else have an art teacher that had magic markers that smelled like the color? I did. And I had a shop teacher that had magic markers that smelled like getting high. There we go. So that's that. All right, now take that off of there. Ta-da. There's our pattern, close enough for what we're building. Now I'm going to go take this over to the bandsaw. I'm going to cut the pattern out on the outside of here, and then I'm going to sand to the edge. It's actually backwards from how you would normally do this. The other option would be to take the piece that I cut out and have that as the pattern, but we're going to do it this way because I can just carefully sand this so that it fits nice. Okay, so this pattern sucks. It was not good. That pattern was not good because the holes are wrong. So I'll show you the piece I cut. This piece here is actually kind of critical because this is so close to the edge. Because these screws are so close to the edge, and I'm using a pretty thick piece of material, which I kind of have to use, it's critical that these match up, or else you end up with cattywampy holes. And I went off the same pattern. Wow, a whole 48 hours later, I forgot that pattern was no good. And I actually, my other one, the holes are cattywampy and it drives me crazy. I'm not going to fix it, but it definitely is not happy. I'm not happy with it. So what I did was I took this nice piece of clean, sans the oil stain, paper here, and I set it down on top of it, and I transferred the hard edges on here with just my dirty hand and a little bit of nose grease on my finger, and then I just went around it like that. Okay. Now I can take a pencil and I'm going to go on the outside of this. Every time you make a pattern of something, you make it just a little bit different than the original design. So this curvature here needs to be a little bit closer than the way I had originally done it. I took too much off with the sander, and I forgot that I did that. This part is it seems to me like it's actually like slightly asymmetrical. It doesn't look it, just like at a cursory glance, it doesn't look asymmetrical, but the truth of the matter is, I think it is. So like this end is smaller than this end, even though it doesn't look like it is. Every piece that I've made so far, if I put the pattern in, I have to mark the pattern to make sure what side it is. So this actually goes this way. So this is this piece, and that piece. And then I got to remember that this is the front, and this is the front. So I'm going to cut this out. I have plenty of plywood. Like if you're short on materials, I would recommend being a little bit more careful. I have this particular type of plywood, I've got a ton of it. So I'm not overly concerned. The mess up here, the screw up here, was my placement of the holes was not correct. When I made the pattern the first time, it never occurred to me that I had done it wrong until after I did it. I was kind of in a rush, so, and the other one's perfect. It works exactly. I mean, it's not perfect, it's wrong, but it works. I'm kind of at that point. All right, now let's try this again. And this pattern wants to fit really tight, actually. And these corners are what's critical because of these screws. These not so much, but these ones need to be, those ones need to be a little bit closer. So I'm going to make another pattern off of this one. Out of this heavier cardstock here. Nope, I'm going to have to do it that way. I got a ton of this stuff, so I'm not overly worried about it. I'm going to do the same thing here. If I was any good, I wouldn't have to. If I was any good, I wouldn't have to do this stuff. If I had the technical knowledge, oh, I 3D printed this. Anyway, I don't have a 3D printer, nor the ambition to learn how to use it. Okay, so we're gonna do it old schooly style. All right, so that's that. So we're gonna hang on to this pattern. And actually, I'm gonna get my cutting mat out, and I'm gonna very carefully cut this out on a cutting mat. If you don't have a rotary cutter, I really suggest buying one. Make your life, made my life, it changed my life, let's put it that way. It doesn't like to, it likes to cut, it'll cut a wide arc. It does not like to cut narrow arcs. Or radiuses. It'll cut a super wide radius, and this piece is radiused. The other thing that was worth its weight is this cutting mat. I know this seems like overkill, but the truth is it's not. And you'll see why when I drill the holes. Okay, now wiggle it till it falls off, which is not going to work, never does. Okay, now some days You can see it's very pronounced here. If you flip it over, you can see where, and that's not my bad cutting. Okay. That's this part is asymmetrical. This is also the screws. This is also the screws will be properly planted or properly placed here. Okay, so you can see that this fits really nicely now. Actually, it doesn't. I guess I might have it backwards. Or it actually is asymmetrical, or isn't asymmetrical, and that I'm just screwing up somehow. No, there we go. That's the way it's supposed to be. So that is like that. Oh, so I must have marked this wrong. Because the part is absolutely asymmetrical. There's no doubt about it. Because if you flip it if I flip it this way, it matches up perfectly. Perfectly as I ever make anything. Yeah. So that this piece is absolutely asymmetrical. So this is now going to be the front. It just ever so slightly. I mean, it could just be manufacturing, like something in the manufacturing, like the way the mold was popped out or something. This is why I marked it and I still messed it up. There you go, kids. Okay, there we go. And there. I flipped it 4 different ways and it was wrong 3 different ways. Okay, so that's that and that's that. Now I'm going to go cut it out again. I'm going to mark it differently this time. So this is the point. This is the point here. Sharpie is not the best thing to use for this. But this particular material that I'm cutting is so heavy, it's so poorly finished that it needs the Sharpie to like kind of absorb into the grain of the wood. This is very, if I was doing this with like hardwood, I'd use a pencil. And my piece is a little narrow too. Okay, and we'll be back. All right, here we are back again. Now this is the pattern that I made. Now I actually just spent a good bit of time tweaking this pattern. And you can see here I get little tiny tweaks here and there. This fits in here perfectly. Actually, it fits in with a little pressure because this is actually soft. So I wanted to make sure that got pressed in really good. Then I spent some time here tweaking this pattern so the pattern fits almost perfectly inside of this. Now why did I do that? Well, I can't stress enough that these holes, the placement of these holes in this piece of plywood are relatively critical because they're thicker. This is thicker than this, right, by a lot. So this is probably 1/8, if not more, thicker. And I want the screws to be countersunk. The screws need to be countersunk into these holes and they need to be straight. So we're going to take our pencil here and mark the holes a little bit better than I did the last time. Oops. Yeah. These ones in particular want to be pretty close to where they got to be. You know, whenever you modify something, you're always futzing forever things. And you can tell really, it really shows here the asymmetry of this part. The further you go, the further I went along with this project, the more I realized that it was an asymmetrical piece. Okay, now front, front, front. And the other thing I did, which was really funny actually, was when I put it together the last time, I actually did it wrong. So the reality is that this part, this is the back, this is this side of the part. Okay. Yeah, so this actually is like this. So what I need to do is take this pattern and do this with it. Make sure it's nice and have you. Excuse the air drill, because this is the one that always has an 1/8 inch drill bit in it. This is why Clecos, I use Clecos for everything when I'm doing with sheet metal, because the pattern will inevitably move on you. Alrighty, perfect. Now, I'm going to take this over to the drill press and drill these a little bit straighter. Okay, we're back. After a little bit more tweaking, obviously everything requires tweaking. Part of that is because my Harbor Freight Chinese bench-mounted sander isn't parallel to the table. So basically what happens is every time I sand something on that, it's canted a little bit. So I got to sand one side, flip it over, and then sand the other side. And I can't, or I don't have the ambition to fix that right now. I have to take the whole machine apart and shim it. And then, quite frankly, it looks to me like even if I shim it, it's going to change all the time. So it doesn't matter. It was cheap. It was Harbor Freight. And it works. So I'm reusing the screws that came out of this because they're plastic. What I'm screwing into is plastic. And I don't want to introduce new threads to the plastic. These are fine. It's perfectly fine. And you can really see the asymmetry of this part now that it's all put together, and why I spent all that time making the patterns, because you can see this here. That was just kind of the effect, right? So now, next step. I'm going to have to put buttresses in, or I'm going to have to raise this up a little bit, but we're not going to do that just this second. We're going to get on to the next part, which will be the base for here. Now this is actually the much more, the much more complex part to make, believe it or not, because this is going to require routers and such things. And you can also see here that the original piece that I made is no bueno. Okay, so I don't know if it should, yeah. The holes don't line up. So this one, kindling. And this one's chair arm. All right, now this one's pretty easy to do. So the first thing we're gonna do is flip it over. You know, eye it up to relatively straight and square. Take our pencil here, actually. and just mark these holes. You know what? We don't even need to do that. We actually need to do something else first. And the first thing we need to do is square this up. This piece should be 2 3/4, which means it's 1 5/8. Oop, inch 3/8. Damn you, math in my head. Okay. Flip it this way. These, this particular Harbor Freight measuring tool is not at all accurate, and my math is off by 1/16 of an inch, so it's actually 5/16. Hey, look at that. If you remember how you're supposed to do it, you know, we're gonna put that over. Mark it right. This plywood is actually really difficult to deal with. It's so rough and cheap that it's very difficult to mark on, but it's free. If it's for free, it's for me. Now, what do I have to do here? So, what I found out the hard way doing the other one is that this here interferes with any hardware that I put in here. So, but I also want to spread the load out. So what am I going to do? Now, these, when I originally made it, I'd put the screws at the end, not realizing that these bolt heads were going to be in the way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of lay this up here, kind of get an idea, and then I'm going to say I want to put one here, and I'm going to put one here. And we're going to go drill holes right there. Years ago, when I was feeling rich, I bought this kit here from Woodcraft. And in this kit, it has all kinds of knobs and things and doodads that are kind of, some can be a bit of a pain in the butt to get. They're not really a pain in the butt to get, but it can be a pain in the butt to get. So I have these flat-headed bolts here. And so what I'm going to do is, that kit has come in handy more than I can count. Now you'll notice these holes are way oversized, and there's a reason for that. That reason is I'm lazy. And if there's slop in the holes, then I don't have to worry so much about making the holes perfect. Sloppy holes are not that big of an issue here for this particular project. If we were building a nuclear reactor, I might be a little worried about sloppy holes. We're going to space, I might be a little worried about sloppy holes. We're not doing that. We're building an armchair here. Sloppy holes make for easy assembly and adjustment. Okay, so I marked out where those go. Now I got these. This is a flat bottom router bit. When I come back, you'll see what that does. Okay. Because I screwed these up. This one was because this side got screwed up because the jig moved in the vise, and that's what that's from. And I screwed this one up just because I'm a nitwit. So now, just like your aunt that has too many cats, I'm gonna hot glue these in. This, like, again, this isn't a nuclear reactor. This is, this is a chair. So hot glue has become my friend, and actually, quite frankly, my nemesis as of late. A nice big burn on my hand there. Oink, I'll stuff that in there. Yeah, those are really hot. Ooh, hot lava. Okay. And stick that in there. Just jam it in the hole. And that'll hold those in place. Ah, wow. God damn, that's hot. I burned the piss out of my finger yesterday blowing glass, so this is nothing. All right. Ah. I'm gonna get that off of there before it gets too hard. Otherwise, I gotta wire brush it off. This is getting cut off anyway. These long pieces are getting cut off. Okay, so I don't think they're gonna go anywhere for the time being, but just because I can, and I got the hot glue out, so I might as well just cover these up, and then I'll take it over to my Chinese belt sander and I'll sand the glue off. It'll do two things. It'll clog up my sander, but it'll make this nice and flat. All right, so I'm gonna let that sit there for a minute. I'm gonna sit. Ow. Okay. Ow, damn it. Fucking hot glue. Well, we'll let it dry and it'll probably peel off. Oh, the other thing, I spent an hour pawing through my hoard for the last 4 fender washers I can find. I guess I'm going to have to go back over to Fazio's and buy another 10 pounds of them. Okay, so I set up this improvised fence here on my router table because the factory fence doesn't work anymore with this janky setup that I have, and I'm too lazy and cheap to buy a real router table. So this is what I got. This is a 1/4-inch spiral cutting bit, and this actually might get interesting because this thing does not like to cut this way. I drilled 2 3/8 holes. I measured it out 1.5 inches on either side, and I drilled 2 3/8-inch holes at the end of the slot. You could plunge this thing in and do it that way, but I broke a lot of router bits doing that. As you can see, my fence isn't straight. Oops. As you can see, the router bit grabs it and drags it along. Whoops. Oh, that was sketchy as all hell, but we have the slot. 2 hours later. All right, well, that's crooked as hell. Oh well. Okay, so I'm going to take these 1/4-inch, 1/4-20 nuts, and I'm going to run them down. This is obviously this is a deep socket. I'm going to run these down. Snap-on ratchets always have on-off on them for a reason. Okay, so Now I'm going to run this bolt down all the way to until it starts actually crushing the wood. I'm doing that for a reason. Alright, that's as low as that's going to go. Now it's crooked, but that's fine. It doesn't really matter. The hot glue worked, and it did exactly what I said it was going to do, which was clog up my sander. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with this one. If you ever have the opportunity to buy this particular Snap-on ratchet, I highly recommend it. I know Harbor Freight makes a similar one, but it's not as nice as this one. It's my absolute favorite ratchet. This used to be my favorite. This used to be my favorite one, but it still is, but this one's like, I don't know, I forget, like 72 teeth. This one's like 80. The only thing I don't like is this handle, but it is what it is. Okay, so we're going to do that. Do this one until it stops. Until it won't grab onto the bolt anymore, so that's fine. We're never taking this apart, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so now, grab the fender washers that I looked around for hours for. And that's going to go like that, that's going to go like that, that's going to go like that. But I have to mount it to this first. So, this, I'm going to do this off camera because I don't feel like moving the camera. I have to mount this in the vise like this. So I can reliably mark and drill the holes. And it's easier for me to just go do that over in the vise off camera. Alright, now we're back. I just used some wood screws that I had laying around. I don't even know where I got them from, but I just ran them in there. I didn't even pre-drill them, which is kind of rare for me, but it is what it is. So we're going to take these fender washers, of course none of which are the same diameter or thickness. I don't know where that one came from. Alright, and they go on there, that goes on there, goes on there like that. That goes on there. That goes in there. Now, here's the cool or bugaboo-y kind of part. So the first set of nuts I put on there were just plain old-fashioned quarter 20s, and these are not nylock nuts because this wants to be sloppy. Remember, it wants to be sloppy. Old Mary Rotten Crotch here. I want this to move. If you don't use nylock nuts, I'm going to actually double duty this. I'm going to put these nylock nuts on here, and I'm going to cut. That's a little too tight. I'm going to back this one off just a tiny bit. Maybe an eighth of a turn. Still too tight. Eighth of a turn. That's still a little tight. There it goes. The reason it's tight is because this plywood is so crappy. So it's riding on in between these two washers here. I did something very similar when I made my GoPro camera mount. So I'm going to put this back in the vise, and I'm just going to take a hand hacksaw, like the one that was in your dad's toolbox that you could never figure out how to use, and I'm going to cut these off. Now, the reason you couldn't figure out how to use it is because you were using it wrong. But there you go. The reason I'm not using an abrasive wheel or like a cutoff saw, the Venerable Wizzy wheel here, is because when you use this saw to cut these bolts off, you melt the nylon and you destroy it. So you really need to use something that doesn't get hot enough to melt the nylon. And basically, that's just just a good old-fashioned hacksaw, and it only takes a couple seconds to cut off a bolt head. As a matter of fact, this one may have came from my dad because he couldn't figure out ever how to use the damn thing either. Now, here we are. Literally, that took me maybe 2 minutes to cut these off. And what it did was it left a nice burr on the top of the bolt, so not only is it nylocked in with a nylon, there's a burr. It's called staking. It's kind of like a half-ass stake. If I was really didn't want this thing to back out, what I would do is either put a drop of red Loctite on it and stake it, or just stake it. I don't need to do either one of those two things. This is in an AR-15. It's not a nuclear reactor. Okay, now what? Now we got a problem, right? So this doesn't fit on here like this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 2 spacers out of the same plywood, and I'm going to glue and staple those spacers to this. All right, so these are a little bit less than 1/2 inch wide. They're, I don't even know. I didn't even actually measure them. I just know they're a little bit less than 1/2 inch wide because the washers will drag on them if you don't make them thin enough. I actually had that problem with the other one. So what I ended up having to do was I took this thing back off and I ran the router down the inside of it to make the hole a little bigger. I may have to do it on this one too, but I just started out with a smaller piece here. So I'm just going to take a little bit of Titebond here. Set that in. And I kind of want it to be somewhat parallel-y. My pin nailer. The pin nails are really just to act as clamps till the glue dries. If you've never used Titebond 3, it doesn't like to come apart. That's what I use on all my cutting boards. I pretty much use it on everything. It's water resistant, waterproof. They say it's waterproof. I say it's water resistant. Let's put a little tiny bit more in there. This plywood, I can't stress how crappy this plywood is. So I kind of left these somewhat accessible. The screws won't come out as is right this second, as I can see. But I can always clean this up just a tiny bit. If I have to take this pad off of here, which I very well may have to do, these are maybe 1.25 inch, 16 gauge or 18 gauge brads. So they don't poke through. They're way short, so they don't come anywhere near poking through this. I may or may have not in the past, not with this project, but other projects, used brad nails that were too long. They poke through, and like when you sit on your go-kart seat, you get poked in the ass with something. Oops. Okay, so we clean that up. Now we're going to do the same thing with this. That's getting lined up like that. That's getting lined up like that. The other one was pretty much even with the end here, so that's the way I'm going to do it. Set that backwards. Go. Well, that would have been a pain in the butt now, wouldn't it? All right, so that's kind of lined up like that. That's kind of lined up like that. There's a little bit back here. Like there's about 1 inch overhang that isn't going to get caught by the brads. That's okay. I'm going to put some glue in here. The glue is actually what's holding this. Like I said, the brads are nothing more than kind of clamps until the glue itself dries. Now, here's where I screw up with the brads. So I mean, I probably could clamp it too. Ah, never fails. Damn it. Forgot to plug the nailer in. Back to very carefully placing this in position. I'm just eyeing these up. It's good enough. This whole project is really not overly concerning how perfect or imperfect it is. I do want it kind of straight, but the tips of my fingers haven't changed in 30 years. Okay, so, you know. Huh, oops. Oops, that's gonna have to get cut out. I ran the brad onto the outside. And I screwed it up. Fantastic. So this was the problem that I had before. And now we have a real problem. All right. So, well, I like to show my warts. I don't think that's going to move in a million years. I gotta get this thing apart before the glue dries. We want to use brads. All right. Wow, that makes me feel stupid. Excellent. Okay, all is not totally lost. And like I said, the brads really aren't holding a whole lot. I'll just pull those through. Yeah, should have learned from experience. All right, so we got that. Aha! Oh, that's a big problem there. Ah, this whole thing just went to hell, huh? All right, kids, you know, improvise, adapt, and overcome. We got a lot of that right now. All right, well, first thing I'm going to do is get rid of those brads. And it looks like, ironically enough, okay, so I'm going to just pull the brads through. Ow! Jackass. If you make a mistake like this and you hurt yourself trying to unfuck it, well then, you know what, quite frankly, I earned it. That was stupid. That was stupid. It's easier to pull brads through. In my experience, it's easier to just pull them all the way through than it is to try to pull them out like a nail. You've already made a mess. You might as well. Brads also like to get stuck in your sandals. Ooh. So you want to make sure you leave them laying all over the shop floor. Okay, so that's done. I'm just going to wipe that glue in. Okay, we're going to set this aside for a second. Unfuck this other mess that I made here. So apparently these screws, although they went in and stopped, are not long enough. And you can see here, this is exactly what I said about I may have to get those screws out someday. Well, there you go. I'm just going to take a chisel for that. and watch another YouTuber called, it's the Tally Ho Project. I forget the guy's. Damn kid says his name every time he starts the video, and I can't remember his name right now. Ooh. That's what I get for rushing. And I'll cut myself. That's good. Oh, so he was getting criticism from some of his viewers about not showing some of the mess ups they've made. My chisel is sharp. So sharp it didn't hurt when it poked me. Alright, so we're going to take these out. Oh, so yeah, he got some heat from his viewers about everything you do is so perfect. Haven't you ever messed anything up? And he's like, oh, we've messed up a lot of stuff. And then he did a whole, he did a whole thing on different things that they've messed up. All right, so we're going to try different screws in that. So these are slightly longer, and now they're actually larger, larger diameter. I had a feeling that that might happen. And we're going to use a hand screwdriver to finish them off because that's bottoming out. I get so much crap on my bench here. Okay, so that was a fantastic level of stupidity on my part, but I fixed it. So I just took the router and I ran the router down there. The other thing I did was I very carefully sighted down this thing. I stuck this on here like this. I sighted down and I'm holding it together and I'm just kind of doing that. I already actually marked it, so if I put it back on the marks where it belongs, put it back on the marks where it belongs, it should be fine. The other thing I'm going to do is, because I can see this end relatively well, okay, so now that's kind of held in place there. And I'm going to take my measuring stick here and just kind of take a second to kind of give myself an idea where I need to put these brads, because I don't want to screw it up again. I you know, generally when I screw something up, I get one chance to redeem myself. Quite frankly, it looks like they just want to go back to right where they were. Okay. Okay. Now, I'm going to check this side, because this side, they're not even, it's not even, like not even by a little bit. So that's like a 1/16 of an inch off. So I'm just going to do this, kind of check it against that one to make sure. Again, just put a dot. Just put a dot. Yeah, right about there, that'll work. Hopefully this time I don't make an ass out of myself twice. Okay. Now. Looks like it worked. That looks like it worked. Now that'll loosen up a little bit. There we go. Now let's put it back on the chair. Now,
this is the nylon washer. I'm going to jam that one on there first. If you do it backwards, the chair won't want to move. And then we're going to put the washer on. Make sure you get the flat spot in the right spot. Same here. I didn't bother putting any more grease on these things. They're plenty greasy enough. I should also note that these are nylock nuts, so you want the nylon part at the top. Actually, theoretically, if this was an airplane, we would be replacing these. We're not doing that. And don't crank them all the way down until you move the chair. I like the arms to be relative, like, I don't want to say floppy, but floppy. Kind of want them to stay, but I kind of want them to move too. So you can adjust that one way or the other. I'm not putting that cover back on. I'm gonna flop my fat ass back down in the chair here. They're not even. What did I do differently? Well, I'm not going to lose a whole lot of sleep over that. But they're definitely not, they don't feel even. Let me put them onto the table here. I can tell right away. Alright, so they're only not even by maybe a quarter of an inch, and I actually know why. It's because this one is actually built nicer than this one. This one's kind of, if I wanted to even them up, what I could do is try to get this bolt out of here, which isn't going to come out, and raise this one up. Just this one's actually going like this a little bit. But let's take a second here and grab a piece of glass. Oh yeah, that's much nicer. Okay. Well, there you go. What a fantastic way for me to waste my Sunday morning, right?